All right, welcome on in, everybody. Let's get started here. Still got people coming in. I think. Let's see. Are we caught up? Oh, let's see. Okay, so some good questions coming in here, and still people coming in there. Okay, we got everyone admitted. Okay, a few things to talk about that I want to clarify, and then we'll start to have some statistics discussion. And these questions are good, so feel free to throw the questions in there as we go. So one question that came up is that the due dates are currently all August 30th. I just did that because the due dates they all said June before, so I had to update them at least to this semester. I kind of want to take the first couple weeks are always a little hard to schedule because there's always some stuff that makes you go a little faster or a little slower than you would prefer, like what I'll talk about it in a minute with the bookstore. The situation with the bookstore means, some people might not get the homework done quite as fast as they'd like or I'd like. But no, all 10 chapters are not due on the 30th. At the moment, really, you should just be working through the chapter 1. So sorry if there's any confusion on that. If you're working through chapter 1, you're in a good spot. If you're ahead of that, then you're ahead of the game. But they're not all due. We're gonna be doing them over the course of the entire semester. The problem is I have to be a little bit careful when I assign the dates because if I assign them too far out, it's hard for me to make the date shorter because students get mad. If it originally said you have until October 30th and then I readjust it to October 21st, students get grumpy about that. So usually what I try to do is have the dates a little shorter and then I can extend them if we need to. But I haven't gone through and adjusted that yet because usually once we're through the first chapter, then I can start to estimate when we're going to get through each one. But sometimes that first chapter, sometimes we finish it in week 2. Sometimes it goes into week 3. So just bear with me where I figure that part out at the moment.
Hi, quick question.
Sure.
I was working through the lesson, like the first chapter.
Okay.
I know I didn't finish it, but it graded it already without me finishing it.
Okay, so that's a good question. So the way it works is it grades it as you do it. So if there's are you concerned because maybe you got one wrong and you're worried about that part?
No, I was just concerned because I was like, wait, I didn't finish it. Grade it, but if it grades it as I finish it, then that's okay. It was just a good question. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure. Yeah, basically as you do each problem, it's going to update in the database that you got that problem right or that you got it wrong or whatever. Basically, if you're on the homework, every time you make a move, it's recording it. Even if you get it wrong 3 times in a row and then you get it right, it saves those misses and I can actually go look at them. I usually don't. There's usually not much reason for me to do that. Occasionally there is, but it keeps track of everything. It keeps track of the videos you've watched, the number of times it took you to get it right or wrong. So just to clarify, if you get a problem wrong, you should be able to go back and get those points at a later date. Now, if it's past the due date, you'll only get 50% credit for doing that. Because remember, if you do an assignment late, and nothing's late yet, everything is still open to work on. But once you pass that due date, you get 50% credit. But you can still go back and work on stuff that you got wrong. So don't get overwhelmed that it's grading it as you go. I know that can seem like maybe it's a little anxiety inducing that you can't just work on an assignment and then turn it all in at once, but you can go back and rework on problems that you missed. So that's a good point to bring up. One thing I noticed when I was looking at the scores is a lot of people have gone through and done all the lessons, or some people have, you're all in different places basically in your progress in this. Some people have done the lessons, but there's a lot less assessments being done. So just make sure, like you see here on the screen behind me, make sure you're doing the lessons and the assessments. And that's totally fine if the approach is, I'd rather do the lessons for the chapter so I kind of understand the whole chapter and then go back and do the assessments. That's fine if that's the way that you want to do that. You have some freedom as long as you're getting them done by the due date. That's sort of the goal. That's totally fine. But just make sure, I just want to make sure everyone understands, you're supposed to do the lessons and the assessments by the time, by that due date, because those all give points. And the lessons and the assessments are weighted a little bit different. I know if I forget what it looks like on your screen as a student, but you can see on mine, like it says this lesson and this assessment, they're both 13 points. But what you need to realize is in the grade book, those categories are weighted differently. In other words, the assessments, I think, are worth roughly about 2 times what the lessons are worth. So getting 100% on the lessons doesn't mean you've done half of the homework. It's really more like you've gotten a third of the points for the homework approximately. So make sure you're taking both the lessons and the assessments. Make sure you're doing both, because these 13 points are not equal to each other. This 13 points for the lesson will have less impact on your grade than this 13 points for the assessment overall. So just make sure you know that. Let's see. I had a note here. I wanted to remind myself to talk about something. Yeah. Okay. So make sure you're doing those, and then you can go back and work on the assessments whenever you want, and keep working on those. And I'm seeing progress, so that's great. You have, not quite a week, but approximately a week to get through chapter 1. And I'm hoping at that point we can kind of get into our normal pace. Hopefully we'll have everything settled with the bookstore and everything, and then we can sort of move ahead at that point. I'll talk about the bookstore in just a second. Okay, other thing I wanted to mention, so at the end of this chapter 1, right, there's the assessments and the lessons, and you go through and do the various assessments and lessons, and like I say, some of you are progressing great. Some of you might want to pick up the pace a little bit. Chapter 1 isn't too bad, but I wouldn't want to wait till the end and sort of be crammed on that first chapter. I've reset the dates for the project, the 2 project assignments we have coming up. You have till September 3rd, so that's a little bit of time, but my recommendation is start now for a couple of reasons. So here's the idea of these 2. So we've got the project with the groups. So basically this project is to get your groups together. You're going to be working with these groups for the entire semester, and there's 2 benefits to being in these groups, right? If you really want to... See, I should add a space in here. If you really want to do the project by yourself, you are welcome to work totally on the project by yourself. I just don't recommend it. So you should be forming groups of 1, 2, or 3. If you're in here with, you already have a friend. Some people take classes with their friends. If you have a friend in here and you 2 work great together, then form that group. That's your group. That's good. If you really want to work alone, you can. I highly recommend that you do not be in a group of 1, but some people, that's how they like to do things. That's your choice. You can also form a group of 3. We don't want to get any higher than that, because we're probably going to end up with 1 or 2 bigger groups anyways, because like I've mentioned, some of you are going to be in a group where all of a sudden everyone else vanishes from your group, because we're going to have people drop the course throughout the semester for various reasons. Medical reasons. Some people just realize they took too many classes. Some people realize that statistics isn't clicking for them, whatever. People are going to drop, and then all of a sudden you're going to find yourself without a partner. If that happens, please speak to me, and I will help assist you in trying to find people to work with. It usually works out fine. Usually a group is happy to have someone, another person in there to help them out. So we can deal with that throughout the semester. That's fine. But you're going to form your groups. These groups can really serve 2 purposes. The main purpose of the group is for you to have someone else to talk to with the project. I think I have the project pretty well laid out, but it's an entire project that goes on for an entire semester. And the way it works with statistics is a lot of this is choice, up to you. How you present this material and how you make your choices, your statistical choices along the way is up to you. It's really helpful if you have a couple of people that you meet with however often you decide, once a week or however often your group thinks, to get together and just talk about it a little bit usually helps reduce the anxiety and the nervousness of students a lot, and it will help you understand what it is you need to do moving forward with the project, right? So There's choices to be made in statistics, as you'll see as we progress through stuff, and there's not always a right or wrong answer about how to do statistics. Sometimes there's bad ways to do statistics, and there's good ways to do statistics, but there's oftentimes more than one good way to do your statistics, right? I hate to even use the word the right way, because there's numerous right ways to do statistics, and it's up to the statistician doing those statistics, right? So in other words, imagine we were doing a category for age in this class. Let's say we took everyone's age in this class, and we wanted to make a histogram, right? Well, what we're going to do is throw those ages into a group, and we could have the groups be 1 year so that we show a bar for each age. There'd be a height for 28, a height for 29, a height for 30, 31, 32, whatever the ages are. But you might also look at that and go, yeah, that doesn't really fit. And in some circumstances, that might be the right choice. Or I shouldn't even say that. I should say a good choice. But then if you were doing a little bit different work with that same data, you might say, well, we should group together in ages of 5 years. So in other words, you might have 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, 35 to 39, right? That might be the right choice for a different project using that same data. So when you're, as a person learning statistics, that can be confusing. Well, what's the right answer? What's my category size supposed to be? Should it be 1 year? Should it be 3 years? Should it be 5 years? This is part of what you're going to be deciding as someone who's learning statistics, is you're going to be making those choices. And like I say, there isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer. There oftentimes is a good, there's probably a couple of good answers and a couple of bad answers. You want to be choosing the good ones. And so these are the kind of things where it can be helpful to be in a group and discuss it with your group, and then someone in the group can say, oh yeah, I worked on this the other night, I kind of have it figured out, let me show you what I did, and then they can give you some information, and then you can make that informed decision. It doesn't mean you're going to make the same decision for your project that they made for theirs, but at least you can start to kind of see the different ways to do this. The good news is StatCrunch, which I'll be showing you shortly. In fact, there's information in the early modules about how to get into StatCrunch. It's going to do all the number crunching for you. So it's not like you have to make a histogram by hand and decide, okay, here's what it looks like when I have the categories 1 year apart. And then you have to redo a whole histogram for the ages 3 years apart, 5 years apart. That would take a long time to do by hand, which is kind of how they did it, 20 years ago. We didn't have all this really great software. Now you'll go into StatCrunch. It'll take you about 5 seconds to make your histogram, and then you look at it and go, oh, that kind of looks okay. I wonder if I can do better. And then you'll make another histogram where the ages are 5 years apart, and you go, yeah, that doesn't really look good. I don't think that's the one I want to use. And in the matter of a minute, you can make 5 histograms, and you can decide which one looks the best. And that's what you should be doing. Like for your project, don't go and make one histogram and like check it off the list and go, okay, I've got my histogram that I'm going to put in my project. Make 5 histograms and choose the one that you think tells the best story. That's what we're really doing here in statistics, is you're trying to tell the best story about your data, right? You want to give good evidence about your data. Like think of it as an argument. You're coming into a room of a bunch of skeptical people, and you don't think they're going to believe what you have to say about your data. So you're constructing a story. You're setting it up, right? And we'll be working on this all semester. But you're going to set it up. You're going to tell them what the topic was for your presentation. You're going to explain the questions that you asked. You're going to present the data and all the tools, the hypothesis testing, which we'll get to towards the end of the semester, confidence intervals. You'll show some visuals, histograms, maybe a pie chart, although those are usually not recommended, but sometimes they're appropriate. All these different things. And then at the end, you have a conclusion. And if you've done it well, then this room of skeptical people will go, oh, yeah, that was convincing. I think I agree with that person's take, right? Is really that's how I think about it when I'm working on something like this. Did I make a convincing argument for the point that I'm trying to make? It's just like if you're having a discussion with someone, you're trying to think about, okay, how can I give evidence to convince this person of my point of view? You're really doing that, but you're going to use all the statistical tools throughout the semester. Okay. So, and there's a couple questions I'll get to in just a second. So first thing you want to do, come in here, introduce yourself in a post, form a group of 1, 2, or 3. You don't necessarily have to inform me right away what your group is, but the people in your group should know that they are in your group, right? If you have formed a group with these people. So you come in, introduce yourself, and then you might go respond to someone and say, hey, I see we have the same major. Maybe we're going to be taking, just throw in some little information about yourself that might be relevant. And I see that where people go, especially in other classes that I have, people go, oh, we have the same major. We might be taking classes together in the future. Why don't we form a group now? And then in the future, we'll be, whatever you want to call it, friends or whatever in the future class. And then maybe we'll work together in that class too. That can be super helpful. So you'll come in here, you'll introduce yourself, and you'll see about forming a group. People are usually very friendly. I know it can be scary. You don't want to ask someone if they want to be in a group, and then you get rejected and feel bad or whatever. That rarely happens unless someone has already formed a group, right? So usually people are very glad to be in a group. It sort of takes the pressure off and the stress off, and then you go, okay, good, I have people to work with when I have a question. And the groups are mainly for the project, but by all means, if you have a question on the homework or something that you're not sure about how to use the software, or when I show you how to use StatCrunch, you're still a little confused about it, of course you can come to me. But a lot of people, since they've already formed a sort of camaraderie in their group, it's a lot more comfortable for them when their group meets to just say, hey, can someone show me how to do this hypothesis test? I'm doing it wrong. I think I'm clicking the wrong button for a hypothesis test in StatCrunch. Can someone show me? And then they can help you with the homework or whatever. So it's really nice to have that support group in place. Okay, so that's what you're going to do for this module. You're going to form your groups. The next thing is you're going to start to think about your survey questions. Now, if you really want to have a different topic from the people that are in your group, you can, because you're all turning in your own project. You're all getting your own points for the project. But it's helpful if you choose the same topic and questions as the people in your group, because then you're already all on the same page. You've all, when you come to meet, you've all looked over the data for the same questions. You all have sort of come up with stuff. And then, if your group comes together and there's 3 of you and you all made a histogram for a certain type of question, you might go, oh, I like my histogram. Here it is. And then someone else in your group did a little bit differently, and you go, oh, man, yours looks so much better than mine. I'm going to change mine to be like yours. And then see how you're kind of learning there, and you took a shot at it, and you thought you did it the right way, and then you saw someone do it better. You've now just learned from them a little bit, or they're going to be learning from you or whatever. So I would recommend, kind of the idea is that the people in your group would pick a topic. Once you formed your group, you kind of decide, what should our survey be about? Each semester there have been a number of people doing COVID-related topics. You're welcome to do that, although it might be nice to do something different. But if you really want to do something on COVID, go ahead. There have been stuff about health is a big one. So a number of groups have done stuff on dietary and exercise type questions, right? There was someone last semester, a group was really big into like running, so marathon type stuff, questions. That's fine. TV questions, right? How do you consume TV? Do you do it on iTunes, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu? There's a million of them now. You could have a question about that. There's almost every semester been a question about streaming music. What app do you use to stream music? How many times a day do you listen to streaming music? How many hours do you listen to streaming music a day? You can come up with all sorts of questions. So once your group is formed, I would encourage you to pick a topic, some overarching idea that you kind of want to figure out. You would like to know. Like, you might be curious. If you're curious about other people, go with that topic, right? If you know, I have these habits for streaming music, I want to know what other people's streaming habits are. Do people listen more or less than me? If that's a thing you're interested in, make your questions about that, okay? So what's going to happen is you're going to have, I think you need at least 5 questions. You're welcome to have more. Don't come in with like 20 questions. That's probably too much to tackle for your project. But 5 questions is a good amount. Some people want a little more clarification, so they go with 6 or 7 questions. again, there's no right answer here. I mean, you want to have at least 5, but it depends on your topic. You might pick a topic where 5 questions is all you need to investigate what you're interested in. It could be that 6 questions is the right one. You want that one extra question in there that you think is going to help you make some good conclusions for the project. So you want to think these questions through. One thing about the statistics, it's very difficult after people have taken the survey. You kind of can't go back and fix things. Okay, so you really, don't rush through this stage. If you rush through this stage of picking your questions and you do it kind of carelessly and go, okay, we got our 5 questions, we checked them off the list, we're done, you can really set yourself up for a lot of frustration and extra work later in the semester when you figure out that your questions aren't really great questions. It's going to make it really hard to do the project. So put some thought into it. Think about what you want to ask, and make sure they're good statistical questions that you can do data on. And I know that's a little hard because you're just learning statistics, but try to pick things that are, that you can do your project on, and then come up with some good information. Then what's going to happen when you all submit your questions, I'm going to go through and I'm going to make a giant survey, and it's going to be in StatCrunch, and everyone in the class is going to take that survey. That's where your data comes from, is that everyone in the class is going to answer every question. I've had semesters where there was a total of 75 questions. I've had semesters where we ended up with 120 questions. So it really depends on how full the class is. It'll probably be a little more because I used to only require 4 questions, but now I think it works better with 5 questions because basically let's see, did I skip something I was going to say? Yeah, I'll get back to that. So I pick 5 questions because you want to take this seriously. It says 2 quantitative questions, 2 categorical questions, and 1 2-choice, like a yes, no, or a true, false, or night and day, something like that. The reason for that is with those questions, if you have 2 quantitative, 2 categorical, and 1 2-choice question, you should be able to use almost every single tool that we learn this semester, right? So, for example, if you only have 1 quantitative question, then you're not going to be able to do the correlation stuff. When we get to the chapter on correlation and regressions, you're not going to have enough questions to form those. Now, all of a sudden, your project is missing stuff. So that's why I recommend that you have at least these 5. Now, if you want to use 3 quantitative questions, be my guest. If you want to have 3 categorical questions, be my guest. But if you have less than these recommended, you're going to run into some trouble with the project, which is then potentially going to lower your grade because you won't be able to do a certain part. You won't be able to use certain statistical tools on your data. Okay, that's the whole reason that I recommend this. Also, pick good statistical tools. Each semester there's usually at least one group that when they're done, they realize their questions are terrible. Okay, so for instance, here this would be a good type of question that you could run data on. How many hours a week do you exercise? Right? So everyone's going to answer. Some people might say 0. Some people might say 20, 12, 8, whatever. Everyone's got a different, everyone's a little different, right? So you get all these numbers in. You have now quantitative data, and you can do things like find the mean, the standard deviation. You can look at quartiles. You can make graphs from that data, different visualizations. You can do all sorts of stuff with that. Sometimes people will ask a question like this. This would be a very bad example of a question to run statistics on. You might say, what is your favorite childhood memory? Well, what you're going to get there is you're going to get 40 different answers from 40 different people, and if you think about those type of answers, you can't use any of the data that you're learning as we go through, right? You can't run the mean. You can't put those in a category. Like if you could ask the question, what state were you born in? Well, now you have categorical data because your category is each state. Oh, there were 5 people born in Oregon. There were 18 people born in California. There were 7 people born in Utah, whatever. You can go through and do statistics on that. But if you ask what's your favorite childhood memory, what you're going to get is like more like writing. That's more like an English type question. You're going to get a bunch of paragraphs from different people. You can't really run statistical tools on that. So make sure that you stop and you think to pick good questions. All right. Now, another thing I want to tell you is when you're doing this, don't be terrified that you're going to make a mistake, right? I think a lot of times people have the idea that their presentation is supposed to look like professionals did this and everything has to be perfect and exact. That's not the case. This is a learning project, right? You're as of now, you know very little statistics because most of you have worked a little bit on chapter 1, but you haven't gotten very far. The whole point of the project, what I'm looking for when I'm grading the project, is to decide what you've learned. Not that you have this completely polished, perfect product, because I think sometimes people, they want to be so perfect, they actually leave stuff out because they think, well, this didn't go really well for our project. If I put it in there, it's going to look like we don't know what we're doing. I'm just judging you on what you've learned. So I've had students that come in and say, they'll start off and say, yeah, we picked bad questions. These were the questions we picked, and now we understand why they're bad questions because we weren't able to run any kind of a statistical tools on them, so that really hurt us from the beginning. Well, that student made a big error in picking their questions, but they also just explained to me that they learned, right? They explained to me, yeah, we picked these questions. They were bad questions. Here's why they're bad questions and why we couldn't use statistics on these questions. Now we know better. So, I mean, that wasn't the whole project. It's not like they stopped there. But, they just showed me. We learned a lot about the type of questions that you can ask in a survey and use statistics on. So I don't mark that down as, oh, these people screwed up when they picked their questions. I mark it down as these people learned some stuff about asking statistical questions, right? It's actually a good thing. So in your final project, you can tell me mistakes that you made, but tell me what you learned from them, right? Because that's what I'm looking for is what did you learn, right? So if you mess something up, learn from it. Now, that's kind of hard to come back from. So usually what happens if a group comes to me and says, we don't know what to do, our questions were so messed up, we can't do anything else with them, then what I usually say is, okay, go ahead and use other questions in the survey, right? So if you ask a question about, people's past and you realize that the data is unusable, then you can go ahead and look in the survey and go, let's use these other people's questions over here about exercise. Let's do that instead since we messed ours up. So then in their project, they would start by telling me why their own questions didn't work well. And then they'd say, so then we switch to these other surveys, these other survey questions, and then they can do the rest of the project. They can show me visualizations, hypothesis testing, confidence intervals, all that kind of stuff, okay? So try to pick good questions here at the beginning, but if you do a poor job, you can switch to something else. Also, if, my guess, since this happens every semester, is more than one group is going to do things with exercise. You may have asked 5 questions on exercise, and another group asked 5 questions on exercise. If you see a question that they asked that you kind of as a group go, oh man, I wish we had asked that question, you can use that question too. There's, you probably want to try to stick to the questions from your group, but if you see another question that was asked that you think would fit really well with your group, go ahead and add it in there. Now, it wouldn't make sense to do that if they were on a completely different topic, I imagine, unless you have some type of connection that you can make with that. But, like I say, 2 exercise groups and someone goes, ooh, if we use this other question that these people asked, it could really help us do our project. Feel free to use that question, okay? There's not like an ownership of questions. The reality is no one's going to know anyways if you use someone else's question at that point. So if there's any questions on that, let me know. Right, so there's a question here. What you should be doing when you answer these, everyone needs to, oh, good, some people are already doing it. Everyone needs to leave their own post for these discussions. Okay, so everyone should have their own post in there because the way, when I grade it, basically it goes through each person, alphabetical. It'll start with the first person alphabetically, and it shows me their posts. I read it and go, this person did what I wanted them to do, 10 points. I go to the next person, 10 points. If instead you've listed in there, oh, these are the people that are in my group, and then you put their names, just being able to grade that would literally take me hours and hours because I would have to go back and like coordinate all these names. It's much faster. So every person should always be leaving their own information on these posts. So even if you get together with your group and make a histogram, you decide on a histogram that you think is a good one, each person should post their own histogram. Okay, it's that way I can go through and I can see you did this. That does a couple of things. One thing we saw this summer, which hadn't really been a problem previously, was groups starting to feel like certain members were doing most of the work and other people were just kind of sitting back and getting credit for other people doing the work. So this really forces everyone has to be a part of it. The other thing that I saw is a lot of dividing up work, which is not the point, right? The point at the end of this project is you understand everything we did, not dividing it up where you say, okay, I don't have to learn confidence intervals because, whatever, I'm making up a name, but Emily's going to do confidence intervals and Tony's going to do hypothesis testing, and then Sarah's going to do the visuals, and then I'm going to do the basic mean and standard deviation, all that kind of stuff, and then you only learn the part that you had to turn in. And what that means is you didn't learn 80% of the material. You just learned the 20% that you were responsible for. We don't want that. So while the groups are good for getting together, everyone should be leaving their own post, their own comment in these in order to get credit, right? So, and it starts off, each group member must leave a posting in order to get credit. So I always want to make that clear because no matter what, there's always someone that says, oh, I thought my group members could just leave that. So make sure you always read what it is that you're leaving. When I go through here, if you don't have a post, like a discussion comment, you don't get credit. Even if someone else said, oh, Sarah's in my group, Sarah's not going to get credit unless Sarah leaves a post, a comment on here. So make sure everyone's kind of doing that. And I hope that will kind of ease up this thing where some people, the way it was before, it was making it way too easy for some people to kind of sit back while certain people did a lot of the work. So, so everyone should leave their own comments. And like I say, the people who need to know what group you're in are your group members. As long as you have made, your meeting with your group, everyone in the group knows who's in the group and who isn't in the group, then you're good. You don't even, let's see, what were my directions here? Let me double check. Yeah, so for the first one, you're introducing yourself, forming a group. As long as you know who's in the group, that's good. You're good. Okay. If it was up to me, just a helpful hint, I would form my group soon, because if you think about, who do I want to be in a group with? Do I want to be in the group with the go-getters who get in there immediately and they're trying to get the work done and they're trying to, satisfy their points and satisfy the assignment so that they get full credit? Do I want the people who are in there right away, or do I want to be in a group with the people who are trying to turn this in at 11:59 on the last day that it's due, and they're desperately trying to form a group? Personally, I would rather be in the group with the people who are getting in there right away and trying to get things taken care of. Because to me, that's people who are going to show up to the meetings that we assign. They're going to show up on time. They're going to have done the work that they're supposed to have done. I mean, you might all say, okay, next time we meet, everyone bring the visuals that you came up with, and then we'll have a discussion about, what's good and what's bad about our visuals, and then we can all learn something. Well, do you want to be in a group with people who I didn't have time to get it done, and then, 2 of the 3 people in your group didn't bring the stuff that they were supposed to bring for the project, and then you're back to that one person is like, well, I did the work, but none of you did the work, the preparation for this. And that's not to say that people who do stuff at the end aren't good to work with, but if you can choose, I think most people would choose to do the people that are more enthusiastic about getting stuff done sooner than later, right? That's what I would do. So if it was me, see how there's already people in there, I'd be going in and trying to form groups with those people. But it's up to you. And again, not to sort of try to cast aspersions on anybody, but it's nerve-wracking if people in your group are doing stuff at the last minute and you're already prepared and you're waiting for other people to bring their input. It's just nice if everyone shows up prepared. So what is an example of categorical question? Great question. So And you'll learn this as you do the chapter 1. So some of this stuff, like, it would be a little harder to come up with your questions today. By the time you finish chapter 1, it will be a little easier to answer these questions. But that's a great question. What's categorical versus in fact, let's see. Yeah. In fact, I may have to extend the actual survey questions a little bit more so people can get a little bit into chapter 2 before that's due. But you have two main types of data. Like, if you get into it, statistics breaks things down into a whole bunch of subcategories, but there's two kind of main categories. Quantitative, if you think about quantitative, right, it's basically the word quantity. That's amounts. So a quantitative question is an amount, right? How often do you run per week? That's a quantitative type question. You're going to get an answer back that's somewhere between 0 and whatever, depending on, do we have one of the super long distance runners in the class? They might tell you they run 100 miles a week, but most people, it's going to be somewhere between maybe 0 and 10, something like that. You're getting a number back that represents a quantity, right? It's easy to say, oh, so numbers are quantitative then? Not exactly, but for the most part, the answer is yes. But they have to represent a quantity. So for instance, let's say we took a survey of the numbers that are used for basketball jerseys in the NBA. Well, the jersey on the number on someone's jersey does not represent a quantity, right? If you think about it, what does that number really represent? It's an identifier, basically. It's like a name. Oh, number 8 down there on the field is so-and-so, right? LeBron James, or whatever LeBron James' number is. It's an identifier. It doesn't mean that he got 8 free throws or that he got 8 blocks or anything like that. It's not counting anything. It's just an identifier. So the way you want to ask yourself, one way to ask yourself if something is good quantitative data is ask yourself, would it make sense to take the mean, which is what a lot of people call the average, but that's technically not right. In statistics, we use the word mean, but you ask yourself, would it make sense to take the average of basketball player jerseys on a team? Would that give you useful information? No. So that data is not quantitative. What about telephone numbers? What if we took everyone's telephone number in the class and then we calculated the average? Would that give us useful data? No. So that's not quantitative data either. They're more like identifiers. But most of the time, if your data is bringing back numbers, it's probably quantitative, right? Unless you can just ask yourself, what if I took the mean of this? Would that be useful? If the answer is no, then it's probably not quantitative. Categorical, which is the question that was actually asked, that's when we can put things into a category. So say we asked everyone in the class what their eye color was. We're going to get, some people like to break it down into a million different colors, but break it down into basic answers. You get what? Brown, blue, green. Am I missing any? Some people, to certain health conditions have like a pink color to their eye a little bit. But whatever, that anyone who answers that question, they're going to get put in one of those categories, right? Most people have brown eyes, so you're going to get a whole lot of people with brown colored eyes. You're going to get a handful of people with blue colored eyes. They go into that category. So it's a category that you can use to put that person in a group and then count how many people are in there. High school, right? You could take a survey of all the people in high school and you could ask, are you a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, or a senior? And then every student gets put in one of those categories, right? Oh, here's how many juniors there are. Here's how many seniors there are, right? That would be categorical. Can you form categories from the ages or from the eye color that's given? Sometimes you can convert quantitative data to categorical data. So that then there it gets a little bit fancier, but we could ask everyone in the class what their age was, and we might want to make a chart from the ages, but then we might want to break people down by decades. How many people do we have in their teens, their 20s, their 30s, their 40s? And that point, you've kind of turned it into categorical data because you're grouping people together by a group. right? Once we've turned, like if we took everyone's age, you could ask the question, does it make sense to take the average age? Yeah, that could be, depending on what you're doing, that could be a useful question to ask, right? That could be a useful tool to use. But once we turned it into decades, where it's teens, 20s, 30s, and 40s, can you take the mean now? Can you take the average? Oh, it doesn't seem like it works anymore. That's because we converted it to categorical data. So that's really the question that really helps. Can I take the mean of this? If so, it's probably quantitative. It's not exactly that simple, but more or less, if you can take the mean, it's quantitative. Can we put people in groups and make a histogram out of it? So, here we had 7 people with blue eyes. We had 12 people with brown eyes. We had, 4 people say they have green eyes or hazel, different colors people use. So that's categorical versus quantitative. And we'll be coming up with those. A little bit of that is early in chapter 2. So I'll probably push these survey questions out a little bit further. In fact, why don't I do it? Why don't I do that now? Let's push this out another week to make sure that people can get far enough to really, really read up on those, on that data. Well, let's give you till Sunday because I'll probably make the survey on Monday. Save that. So you have a little bit longer, but we want to get that done because once I create that survey, it takes about a week for people to complete it, and then you'll start having your data, and then you can move forward with the moving forward with the project. Okay, so right, so those were all good questions. So you'll kind of want to be, before you do your questions, you'll probably want to be through the beginning of chapter 2 here. Maybe even try to do a lot of chapter 2. When we get into chapter 3, that's more about actually analyzing your quantitative data. You don't have to know all that before you ask questions. You just need to know really the difference between quantitative data and categorical data in order to get those questions done. And then the other one, you're going to ask some kind of, it's called binary, so there's like just 2 choices, yes, no, like binary from computers. You're either 0 or a 1 when you're stored in a computer, right? So yes, no, true, false, day, night, something like that, where there's only 2 outcomes. We have certain statistical tools that only apply to those kinds of questions. So there's a chapter later on where you'll see that. That's one of the ones where sometimes it doesn't make sense for as much sense for your project. So some people leave that out, and that's not one where I usually mark you down if you leave that out. It can help you if you put it in there, but I don't usually mark people down because that one's a little bit more of an advanced topic. But you should still have a question that is like a yes/no question or true/false or something like that. So hopefully what you're doing by now, you're working through chapter 1. You're doing both the lessons and the assessments. Make sure you're doing both of those. I haven't heard any difficulties getting that done. Oh, the bookstore. So I finally heard back from the bookstore this morning, and I barely had a chance to read the email. So I really hope by the next time I see you on Thursday that I will be able to tell you that everything is squared away with the bookstore. You can go in there and they'll be able to give you that license that you need in order to get your stuff taken care of. So right. So if you want to get into it now, you can buy the license. Otherwise, I'm hoping by the next time I see you, the school will be ready to give you your license that is free. The school is giving out free statistical licenses for the software for the homework this semester, but it always takes forever getting the stuff set up with the bookstore. So I'm hoping you'll get it done because most of you should still be on your 2-week free trial. So I'm hoping by the time that free trial ends, the bookstore will be ready to give you what you need. Okay. Are there any questions? Does anyone? We had some good questions today in both chats. So is there any other questions people have?
I have one question.
Okay.
Were we supposed to buy the book online, or we're not supposed to do that?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm getting at is you when you're signing up for the homework, you can buy the license right from there, and that's perfectly acceptable. But this semester, the bookstore is giving out free statistical licenses. It's just that it's been sort of like trying to swim upriver, trying to get the right ISBN number. Because browsing the email I read this morning, not only do they have a bunch of different ISBN numbers basically for every version of the product. So it's like the book we're using, there's like the 16-week access, 18-week access, 20-week access, and if I don't get it just right, it won't let you in. But also, they're telling me this morning that even for the same exact product, there's different ISBN numbers. I'm like, why? Why make this so complicated? So I'm trying to track this down to make sure I give them the right one, and then they'll give you that license for free. You don't have to actually have a physical copy of the book, okay? It's helpful, but you don't have to have it. I think the way these lessons are set up, you can kind of go back and rewatch a video on a certain thing. So I don't require you to. It's not a bad idea. What I've seen more and more people doing in some of my classes is they'll buy an old edition of the book and then just go from there. A lot of times there's not very many changes, but the only thing you have to buy is the license, and supposedly the bookstore is going to be giving us free licenses to students. So you don't have to have a physical copy of the book. It can be helpful. Like I say, students oftentimes find like the previous edition. I've had students find the books on like Amazon and different websites for like $5. So if it's me and I can get a previous edition for $5 and my teacher's not requiring it, then I would do that, because you're going to have questions where you go, I don't understand how to do a confidence interval for this information. Well, you just look up in the book and you follow the example in the book. Can be really helpful. But you have the online version as well, but sometimes a physical book is helpful. And then there's a question here. Don't know if you answered this, but all the chapters. Yep, all the chapters and assessments are going to be updated. Right now, you should just be focusing on completing chapter 1 stuff. So up to here where it says project survey questions, that's the thing that we're really focusing on right now. Get yourself through chapter 1 by the due dates. And then those of you who are ahead, by all means, start chapter 2. But I'll probably go through here probably in 10 minutes from now, and I'll change these dates for chapter 2. I'll push them out a little bit so that you have a little bit of time to do those. So don't panic. You don't have to do the whole class before September. So sorry if I did not intend to stress people out with that. So sorry if there was any miscommunication. I'll start changing those dates. Okay, so yeah, just focus on this first chapter 1 module. Oh yeah, that's why, because I haven't even released chapter 2 yet. So you couldn't have done it anyways. So don't worry about that. It's not even released to you. You can't do an assignment I haven't released. That's what I was thinking, was I hadn't released them. So so don't stress that. Okay. So, and that's good. We're getting really good attendance coming up live. Sometimes classes, people stop showing up as much, and they go, I'll just watch the classes later, but then they don't watch the classes later, and then they fall behind. So actually the fact that we have so many of this class, people showing up to the actual meetings, indicates to me that there's probably a lot of people in here that are going to be doing a good job on stuff. Probably get some good groups formed, because it seems like there's people that are really, really trying to do the right thing. Showing up to class, doing the homework, forming groups, right? All that kind of stuff. Here's a question. Should all the questions have the same topic? I would yes, because what you're going to be trying to do is answer some overall, like you want to make some connections. Now, you might make a connection to something different, so you might have a question in there that's unrelated. So for instance, I think of one of my groups that, or at least one group had questions that they were largely asking about COVID, but then they had 2 questions about how many hours a week did you work before COVID? How many hours a week do you work now? Right? So that question is kind of really more about work. How many hours a week do you work? But see how they're connecting it to the COVID questions, so they can put it in there, because they might want to make a connection that says, yeah, look at what COVID has done to people from an economic standpoint. People who, people who already needed to work a certain number of hours now are getting half the hours that they got before because of COVID, or less. Maybe people are, some people are working 0 hours because their job didn't exist during COVID. In that case, you're kind of connecting two ideas, but there was a purpose for it, right? There was a purpose about asking how many hours a week you work, because you're trying to connect it to your other COVID questions in some way. You should not have totally unrelated topics. So, I wouldn't ask one question about exercise and one question about streaming music and one question about, what state you were born in, and then one question about how many countries you've traveled to in your lifetime. Like, you want to have stuff that you're going to be able to make some kind of story about. So remember before, like I was saying, a lot of times when you do statistics, you can think of it as building a story. You're building some kind of a narrative or an argument that you're going to use to convince people of what you think you found in your data. You can't really do that if everything is just all over the place. But if you ask 5 questions about COVID, 5 questions about exercise, 5 questions about eating habits or whatever, then you can start to tie those questions together. So it's kind of a gray area, but yeah, you should try to tie them together in one topic. If a couple questions seem like all of a sudden they're about something different, that's okay, as long as you can tie them in to the main topic and say, well, the reason we were asking about the hours you work per week is because we wanted to see the change in hours worked during COVID. Then those are still cohesive. Those still fall under the same group, and it makes sense in that case. And you're welcome to. We can definitely talk about this more. It looks like we're out of time. We can talk about this more in future classes if people want to do that. So feel free to bring questions. Feel free to email me questions, right? I have a class tomorrow where I'm actually going to start the class off with a specific example, because I've had numerous people ask me about this one particular question. So what that tells me is, I better address this in class, because if numerous people are emailing me this one question, it's not that one person's confused, it's that I should go over it in class and answer everyone's question. So feel free to email me. If I'm getting a bunch of people that have the same question, that tells me what I should start class off with, right? Is answering that question and making things clear for everybody so that you know what to do going forward. Okay? So I will stick around in Zoom. I'm going to close down the YouTube stream right now, but I will stick around and answer whatever questions people have for me in Zoom. Otherwise, please continue progressing through Chapter 1, and we will continue in a couple of days. Okay, thanks everybody. This was really great. The questions being asked are fantastic. The participation is really great. If you all keep that up, we're going to see a lot of good grades this semester. Okay?